I've been doing a series of videos on coincidences, and I wanted to talk about a new one that occurred. And I always had this feeling that everything, well, I know that everything that we remember, everything that we encounter is stored in our brains as a series of patterns. So all our memories, everything, and these patterns form associations with each other, and they're stored away in in your brain. So I always had this feeling that somehow this information that's stored in the brain is projected outward into the world, and the world out there that we see is really just a kind of fertile medium, sort of whenever I read about photographic film, that's what I think of when I think of the physical world. That it's like you know like a chemical that receives light and information and produces a picture. And I always thought that these patterns in our brains are projected outward, and the world, this fertile medium, produces a landscape that reflects what is stored inside here. Um, the other day, I had a brief conversation with Rosebush. I'm pretty sure most of you are sub to Rosebush. And he did a video because his cat caught a bird, and this bird managed to survive the attack, and he wanted to nurse this bird back to health. So he was asking for suggestions as to what to feed the bird, and many people suggested crickets and whatnot. I weighed in and said I thought maybe try seed and then perhaps grasshoppers. Now, why I said grasshoppers is because I recall when I was very young that I would go out onto the lawn after a couple of days after a heavy rain with my favorite cat, who would follow me around, and this cat loved it when I would catch grasshoppers, and he would eat them, and he would crunch them, and kind of gross, but he loved eating the grasshoppers. So when I mentioned that to Rosie in the comment section, it got me thinking about that memory, and I sort of, you know how it is when you daydream, you kind of lose track of where you are, and you kind of go to that other place for a moment, and then after a while you'll snap out of it and you come back to the present. Well, I was having a very vivid sensory experience, remembering what this was like. I felt the wind. I could feel the grass under my feet. I would think about how the grasshoppers, you would wade through the grass, and the grasshoppers would just spring out in a spray as your feet move through the grass, and there were just hundreds of them, and the sunlight streaming through the trees, and it was just having this really wonderful experience. So I snapped out of it, and then Rosie responded to my comment, and he said, well, in all the years I've lived in Ireland, I don't think I've ever seen a grasshopper. And then I stopped to think that, wait a minute, I don't think I've ever seen a grasshopper in Canada either. Cause I sort of assumed that they must exist here. But then when I thought about it, the fact that I had not seen one, I thought maybe their eggs can't survive the winter and that sort of thing. Who knows? But I've never seen one. So I kind of pondered it for a little bit, and then I forgot all about it. A couple of days later, I went on my usual walk, and I go on this route quite frequently. And I passed a series of houses, and one of these houses has old growth trees, and there are quite a lot of birds that you know hang around, yeah, that sort of not hang around, nest in the trees, and sometimes they can be pretty aggressive. They'll kind of watch you as you walk past until you get to the boundary of their territory. Um, and there's this one bush that grows out from over the fence and protrudes onto the sidewalk, and you cannot miss it. Every time I walk past, when I'm going and when I'm coming back, I look at that bush, and I just look at it and I think about it, and I look at the state that it's in. And this bush is